Hello, Facebook. We are so grateful to be here today. My name is Camille, and I want to welcome you to our Tucson Village gathering today. We have a wonderful lineup today, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right. So like I said, welcome to our Tucson gathering today. My name is Camille. I'm administrative assistant here at fourth trimester. And I'm filling in today for our fabulous Tucson Village lead. Her name is Eileen, who's at a doctor's appointment this morning, but she'll be joining us shortly after she gets back. So don't fear, she will be here. If you don't see any familiar faces, that's why. So I wanted to welcome each of you again to our village gathering today, where we're going to be discussing back to school. And we're going to talk about all things back to school. We have a wonderful presenter. Her name is Amy Baum from First Things First. She's the regional director, and she's going to lead this conversation. And today, while we talk about back to school, we're going to take time to consider that what works for each of our families, and also acknowledge our own feelings about going back to school while we are recovering. And frankly, we're still in a pandemic. So I'm excited for this conversation today. Before we get started with that, I want to just remind everyone on Facebook and here on Zoom what fourth trimester is. Fourth Trimester Arizona was established to honor and support parents as they navigate the very real challenges and joys of parenthood, and to connect them with a community that embraces and supports them in parenting. We are the village into which Arizona families are born, and we aim to change the culture of parenting in our community so that no one has to do it alone. In our village and all of our villages, families are loved, they are seen as capable, and they belong. So thank you so much for joining us today in this Tucson Village gathering. I also want to remind everyone that we not only have this fabulous Tucson Village that happens on the fourth Wednesdays of the month, we have 5 others, so 6 total. We have our Cuatro Trimestre in Espanol, which is our Spanish-speaking village, which happens on the first Wednesdays. We have our Central Village, which happens on second Wednesdays. Our Black Mamas Village, which happens on third Wednesdays. Our East Valley Village that also happens the third week of the month, but on Thursdays. This village right here, our Tucson Village, happens on the fourth Wednesdays. And we have a West Valley Village that is currently on summer break, which happens on the first Wednesdays of the month. All of this information about our villages can be found on our website, which is fourthtrimesteraz.org, as well as social media. We have a Facebook group, we have a Facebook page, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So I'm so excited to welcome to you today, Amy Morales Baum. Amy is a native Tucsonian who lives with her husband and 3 children, ages 10, 8, and 5. She is an early childhood advocate who has worked in the field for over 15 years. She obtained her Bachelor's of Arts in Elementary Education from the University of Arizona and is finishing her last class that will complete her, and I heard today, her last paper, her assignment. So that's even more exciting. She's right there to complete her master's in early childhood education from Northern Arizona University. Her experiences include working as a public school teacher in public, private, and international settings, working with the Arizona Early Intervention Program, serving children and families in the Department of Child Safety as a rapid response clinician, and directing private preschools for over 8 years. Currently, Amy is the regional director of Pima North for First Things First, and she volunteers with the Southern Arizona Association Education of Young Children. So thank you so much, Amy, for being here today. We are so excited to hear from you. And
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be
here. Yeah, and I'm going to start your slideshow and get you going. Anyone who's joining us today, either on Facebook Live or on Zoom, if you have questions, please either pop those in the chat or you may place them on our comment section and we'll answer those. And take it away, Amy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today and just honored that I was asked to share some information. So today I'm going to be talking about all things childcare and preschool when it comes to enrolling and thinking about all of the different aspects of what it means to enroll your child in preschool or childcare. And especially in light of the pandemic and the different fears and anxieties that have come up along that. And enrolling your child in a school for a very first time, it can be a really overwhelming process. Next slide, please. So as Camille introduced me, thank you so much for that introduction. So yeah, this is me and my family here. I have 3 children. They are 10, 8, and 5 now. So they're a little bigger than this picture. My youngest is actually headed off to kinder. But as a young mom, I definitely had to go through the process of figuring out what school to send my children to and how to navigate childcare, which can just be such an overwhelming process from when they're infants. And if you're having to go back to work then, to even finding a preschool or a child caregiver that is a great fit for your family. So I am from Tucson, and I am so grateful to have worked in this region for so long. My most recent experience, as Camille had said, is being a preschool director. And so I did that for 8 years. And I think that being a parent and having that lens in terms of having to tour different schools and figure out what the next situation, and then also being on the other side of the coin and saying, okay, welcome to our school. I'm so glad you're here. What are you looking for? Asking those kinds of questions is part of the reason why I'm here today, to just kind of share some of those experiences and how you can approach it for when you're looking for a school for your child. Next slide, please. So the very most important question that I think that everyone should ask themselves when it comes to finding childcare, finding a center, whether it's a family-based care center or in a family home or a nanny or a childcare center, that the most important question you can ask yourself is, what is the best fit for our child and for our family? So as you're doing that, there are many different things to consider. The first is there are many different approaches to preschool and to early childhood education. So there's Montessori, there's Reggio Emilia, there's a more traditional approach that can be a little more academic. There's play-based preschools, there's outdoor preschools. There's so many different ways to approach childcare. And so because of that, those are things to consider. And that may be something that is important to you and may not be, but if it is, looking into the different types of preschool out there would be something that would be helpful. Along with that, some families are wanting language immersion. So if you're wanting your child to be immersed in Spanish or Chinese or any of those things, there are preschools out there that are language immersion. And so you want to look into those schools in your area that do that as well. Other considerations, convenience and hours. So if you, for example, have your workplace and it's about 45 minutes away, and you want to find a childcare center, but the one that you really like is 45 minutes in the other direction, that could make a really big bearing on whether or not that decision is the right school for you. Also, the hours of operation. Are they open from the hours that you're going to need care? Are they open for the hours that your workplace is going to be there so that you have enough time to get to and from work? And then finances. Do you have the financing for it? And I'm going to talk more about financing options here in a little bit. Some other questions that you could ask yourself with this would be, what setting will your child thrive in? A smaller setting, a larger setting, a home-based setting? Is location important? Do you wish to have a school that continues on to the other ages? So there's public school preschools that go on to the K through 8 or K through 5 system. Would you like to have them connected to that? Also, what are your goals for your child during this preschool experience? And are they for them to have a play-based experience, or is it just for them to be able to make friends and have socialization? Is it for them to get that language immersion? Those are different questions that you can ask yourself. Another question is, do you desire a faith-based education? There's a lot of faith-based programs out there, and maybe that's something that's important to your family. If it is, looking for a program that is faith-based would make sense. And then also, is this a school that will work for all of your children? Sometimes we have children with different needs with their own family. And so will the school be able to serve my whole family? Next slide, please. So these are some things that I'm just going to pause for a moment here and allow anyone who's joined us to just really think about what are some of those things that are important to me and my family. And this is obviously something that you'll spend some more time with, maybe with your partner or on your own, thinking about what are the things that are most important to you as you are considering enrolling your child in school or in childcare. All right, I'm going to continue on, but again, I want to emphasize how important this part of the step is, because there are other steps that need to take place, and we're going to go into those now. But making sure that the school that you or the childcare provider that you end up enrolling with aligns with what is best for your family is something that is really important. I do want to note within that, though, that sometimes we just have to go back to work, or we just have to enroll a child to find childcare right away. And so we don't always have the luxury of finding the best fit, and that's okay too. But if you do have time and ability to do that, I encourage you to do that. Next slide, please. So the next slide is about ourselves. Am I ready for my child to go to school? This is a really big step. It's the first step in a letting go of the process of parenting. And so there can be a lot of emotions around this for us. Sometimes I know for myself, when my middle son was 9 weeks old, I had to go back to work for our family situation. It was a really difficult situation for us. And it was so hard to go back and navigating pumping and figuring out childcare. And I had a nanny at the time, and then my other son was in preschool. And so it can be just such a big task to have for ourselves to have our children to go to school. And so I think just maybe allowing some grace for that, of allowing some time for processing all that and acknowledging that it's just hard. And sometimes we're able to stay home with our children, or we're ready for them to head off, but just they are more ready, but we're not quite ready yet. So those are all things that we need to consider as we are launching our children off to school in the big world out there. Next slide, please. Another consideration is my child ready for school? Sometimes we have children who are social butterflies, who are ready to go. They are very independent. They're super social, and they really just want to go be in preschool. And so some things that we can look for are that exerting more independence and wanting more socialization. Sometimes we also have children who like to cling to our sides and just want to be with their parent. And so I think that that sometimes the transition for our children that are maybe a little bit more have a little bit more separation anxiety, or want to be by our side a little bit more, can be a little more challenging. Again, that being said, sometimes we don't always have the luxury to say, is my child ready for school? Am I ready for them to go? And that's okay too. And what we need to do is still just find the best situation that we can within those circumstances. Next slide. And so we're going to talk about finding a preschool. Next slide. So there are lots of different options for childcare out there. There's private preschools. There are public school preschools. Most of those start at the age of 3 or 4. Family home care. So there's a lot of family home care providers, people who have been providing care within their home. And nannies. And there's lots of different ways to find these different preschools. First, online searches, right? You Google it, you look on Yelp, you look on any of the different resources, you just search in there preschool or in my area. So that's one basic way to find it. The second is family and friend referrals. So studies have shown that the vast majority of people end up finding their childcare through family or friend referrals. So somebody they know sends their child to family home care or to that childcare center. So that is how a lot of people end up finding the childcare that they have. There is a great resource, and I'm going to dive into it a little bit more here, called Childcare Resource and Referral. And Childcare Resource and Referral, head on back. Childcare Resource and Referral is a nationally funded program, and we have it here in our state, that actually goes through and shows you all of the different childcare in your area. And that can be from home care to childcare centers. That shows you the gamut of what's out there. There's a website, and I can actually throw that in the chat for you here. And you can actually go to their website and check out all that they have to offer. You put in your zip code, and it shows in your area the different types of care there. It also shows whether or not they are quality rated, and we'll talk a little bit about that more, and how many stars they have, or whether or not they're accredited. And all of the childcare in there are going to be licensed childcare centers, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Another resource is called Trusting Connections that we have here in Arizona. I believe they also are in Texas. They are a nannying agency. There are other agencies like this as well, but this is one that we have in our region that helps to connect you to nannies. I know care.com is another one that can do that as well, but helps connect you to nannies who are qualified and maybe are meeting the hours or the schedule that you need. So those are all ways that you can find a preschool. Okay, next slide, please. So before we go into like the steps of touring and enrolling, I just want to talk a little bit about what quality means. So here at First Things First, we talk a lot about how 90% of a child's brain growth happens in the first 5 years. So much happens in these first 5 years, and it's so important that we surround our children with quality. And so finding quality care matters. Again, whether that's someone who comes to your home as a nanny or some wonderful preschool teachers just loving on your children, finding that matters. So your caregivers should be qualified and or experienced. This means that they either have an associate's degree in early childhood, or they have a CDA is what it's called. It's a child care development associate. It's a certification in child care, and or a bachelor's or higher. Or they could have maybe 15, 20 years experience. So those are ways that we know, or even 5 years experience, they know about early childhood and what a child is going to need to care for them and give them that quality that they deserve. Next are licensed and good records. So in a childcare program, whether it's a family home care or a childcare center, if they care for more than, I believe it's 6 kids, they have to be licensed. And so that means that they have to go through the Arizona Department of Health Services. They have to go through the process of making sure that they have an annual inspection, that all of their staff have passed background checks, fingerprint clearance cards, have some levels of ongoing professional development that are happening. You can also look up their records to see whether or not they have any maybe dings on their records, or if they have great records for their annual inspections. Those are ways to kind of check on the care. Another is to see whether or not it's accredited. There's a lot of accreditation agencies out there, like the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or the National Accreditation Committee. They are different agencies that are helping to make sure that a center or a home care provider is adhering to the highest of standards for early childhood. If a center or a care provider has gone through the accreditation process, it means that what they do is they take extra steps to ensure that the health and safety of the children are at the forefront, that their levels of education are at the forefront, and also that they're using what's called developmentally appropriate practice, or DAP. You'll hear it referred to in early childhood, that those standards are there. And so if someone has gone through that process, it really means that they're putting that ahead, and they're putting some concerted effort into making sure that it's quality care for your child. Another thing that we have here in the state, and it's actually a program of First Things First, is called Quality First. And Quality First is a star rating system that rates programs from stars 1 to 5 as to their quality. And so a center that's a 3, 4, or 5 star is considered a higher quality center. 1 or 2 is a center that maybe still needs some work on their care. And you can actually go to the First Things First website and Quality First website and check out the local centers in your area that participate in Quality First and see what their star rating is. Along with that, you can see that through the Child Care Resource and Referral website that I was referring to before. One thing I want to finish this slide with, is that I recently attended a study that was, it was a webinar about a study that just came out about parents and what is most important to parents when it comes to their childcare. And these were the things that popped up as the top 5 things. These parents were given over 20 different options as to what is the most important thing to me as a parent. And the first thing is that the caregiver is trusting and nurturing. That's the number one thing. Above all the accreditation and rating and licensing and all of these different things, that for parents, the first thing is that their caregiver is trusting and nurturing. The second thing is that it's affordable. The third is that it's reliable. So I can't show up and not have care that day, right? If my nanny's not here for 3 days in a row, I now have missed work for 3 days, or I've had to figure out remote work for 3 days, and it has just been a nightmare. So reliable care. Number 4 is that it's healthy and safe. And number 5 is that the caregivers have lots of experience. So when asked, and this was a survey of over 600 parents when in the state of Arizona, so when asked, the top 5 were those items. So I think that that just puts into perspective that sometimes all of the rules and regulations, for those of us who've lived in the childcare world, they do matter. But to parents, at the end of the day, that caring, trusting, nurturing caregiver is the number 1. Next slide, please. So this is what the Child Care Resource and Referral site is. I wanted to at least just give you a little picture of it. And again, there will be links that you guys, that I will provide for you all for all of these sites, and then those can be provided to the recording as well. But so here you can search for childcare. You can even provide a complaint, maybe if you had an issue with a childcare provider. And there's lots of different other resources on this website. Here is where you'll go to that little families tab up there. And on the families tab is where you can search for childcare. Next slide, please. So on the right-hand side of the screen here, you'll find what's called the childcare quality childcare checklist. And in this checklist, I know it's hard to see on this particular slide, but this is a resource from Child Care Resource and Referral. You can see it on their website. It goes through a bunch of different questions that really help you to narrow down some of the things that might be on your mind when you're looking for childcare. And this can apply for nannies or childcare centers or family care homes. So asking questions like what are the ratios, right? Is the ratio 1 to 4 for infants, or is it 1 to 3? How many years have your teachers been here? Asking about retention. What does your curriculum look like? And do we get copies of the lesson plans? What kind of communication do you use to communicate with families, and how regularly do you communicate with families? Are you accredited in any way, shape, or form? All of those types of things that you might have questions for as you are embarking on getting to know a child care center or family care home. So the first step is to call and set up a tour. I really, really encourage you not to just show up at a center. I had that happen many times. You need to call and set a tour, because often, whether it's the director or assistant, they have really busy, and they usually have time set aside for tours that allow them to best pay attention to you and give you a full tour and a good look at a center. So just showing up at a center is not going to allow that for you. But call and set up a tour at one of the centers or family care homes that you might be interested in. Be ready with your questions, and you can bring this checklist as your guide. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just back up a little bit about the tour. During a tour, some things that might happen are that as you're going through, you might see some children crying. It's really common in a childcare setting to have a child cry or be upset about something. Children have big emotions. So just because a child's crying during a tour does not mean that that childcare center isn't a quality center. What I would pay attention to in that moment is, how are the caregivers responding to that crying? Are they attentive? Are they getting down at the child's level? What does it look like? What kind of language are they putting towards it? That's going to give you more of a picture of what that childcare center is going to do when your child cries or when your child gets upset, which is going to happen for any child that walks into any center. So those are things to pay attention to. Looking for any major health risks or any practices that just might not seem like they align with you. If you're hearing caregivers who are snapping at children, who are yelling at children, those might be some symbols that maybe this is not a place that is using best practice for children. Are the caregivers attentive to the children there? Is anybody sitting on their phones or not paying attention? Are the children engaged? Does it look like the activities that they are doing are intentional? Is the room set up with activities for the children that are at their level, and fun things like sensory, or you can see on the walls pictures of the children and what they are doing? Those are the things to pay attention to. Another thing is just really, as you're getting to know a center, as you're getting to know a director, whether or not that director seems like someone you would get along with, somebody that you could trust, because the leader in a center really sets the tone for the center. So if that leader it seems like someone that you could communicate well with or trust, they're also going to be hiring people that maybe have a similar mentality that they do. And so that would be spread throughout the whole center. So finding a place that really feels like home for you and your child matters. And that can happen during a tour. You can feel that during a tour. I would often have some families that maybe our center was not the right fit for them, and that's okay. They're looking for something different. Maybe they're looking for that language immersion. They're looking for something different. That's okay. And I would often give them referrals to a different center. My centers were never the perfect fit for everyone, just like any center was not going to be that. And so finding a center that's the right fit for you matters. So if a center does not feel like during a tour the right place for you, that's okay to move on and find another place for you. So once you decide and say, this is the right place for me, the next step is to enroll. And there's typically quite a bit of registration paperwork. Schools want to get to know you and your child. So there's usually a checklist, talks about like what your children like or don't like, maybe a developmental list or an ages and stages questionnaire. It's a developmental questionnaire. Sometimes we fill them out at pediatricians as well, to kind of get to know where your child is developmentally, any medical history, allergies, just who's going to pick up your child. There's a lot of different paperwork and that is needed in order to make sure that we have everything that we need to follow state regulations, and also to make sure that we can provide the very best care. Another thing is that many schools do have a meet and greet for your child and their teacher. So they might have a time where before they start school, they get to know their child. And so you would have a time where you could ask questions and provide information about your child. Not all schools do this, but if they do, I think it's a great way to kind of get a child set up for success, and you as well. You also want to ask about what do they need for the first day of school? Do you need nap blankets? Do you provide lunches, or do we need to do that? Do you want a backpack? Do they need a labeled water bottle? What is it that I need to bring for my child? Diapers, or extra clothes, all of those things, so that my child can come ready for the first day. Next slide, please. So another thing to talk about here is funding. So childcare, as we know, can be very expensive, but there are lots of funding options available. So I'm going to talk about a few of those right now. One is a DES childcare subsidy. So if you qualify for this, it's people who are 200% of the federal poverty line. You can qualify for a childcare subsidy. This is something that I also have website links for these, but you can look into this through the DES website and see whether or not you and your family qualify. Sometimes it means you might have a small copay of maybe $1 a day or $3 a day, depending on what your income level is. But this is maybe one way that you could pay for childcare. Another is Quality First scholarships. So through the Quality First program, there are scholarships that are attached to schools. So schools who participate in the Quality First program typically are given Quality First scholarships. They are actually changing regulations so that it would be 300% of the poverty line here pretty soon. Those have not gone into effect yet, but they will soon. And it allows basically the same qualifications as DES, but it's a different type of funding. So if your school participates in Quality First, you can ask them about their different funding options and see if they have Quality First. In the Tucson region, we have what's called the PEEP scholarships. And this is through the Pima County Board of Supervisors. They voted to actually put some of the American Rescue dollars straight into preschool, which we're so grateful for. This is another way that childcare can be funded. And they have actually been opening a lot of preschool classrooms across a lot of the public schools that are paid for classrooms, and many of them do have some room. So I would look into the PEEPS website and see whether or not you maybe live in an area where these scholarships are available. Another one is called the ESA, or Empowerment Scholarship Account. This is for children who are either for preschool age, it's children with special needs. So you have to have an active IEP, or an active individualized education plan, which you can get through the school district, through the Child Find District. So if your child is exerting some kind of delay, this would be that you would go to the local school district and go through the Child Find process. And if you have that active IEP, you qualify for this, and you can take your child to any preschool with this. And basically you get kind of like a debit card that allows you to pay for their monthly preschool. In addition to this, the Empowerment Scholarship also funds military families. So if you are an active military family, you can get your child's preschool paid for as well through this. There's also discounts that a lot of schools do for siblings or military, or if maybe you are a public servant in some way, shape, or form through firefighting and police department. These are things you can ask about. So ask the administrators whether or not they have any discount programs. And then another way to do it is through doing part-time options. Maybe there's half day, or doing 2 or 3 days a week, because it will lessen your cost by having your child there a few less days per week. Next slide, please. Some other considerations that we have here. One is COVID considerations. So I know that many have, COVID turned our life upside down, right? And so one thing you really need to ask yourself is, what is your family comfortable with when it comes to COVID? Schools have been responding to this super differently. And it's really important for you to get a temperature for how the school is responding to COVID and what that looks like. You can ask them for a copy of their COVID protocols. You can ask them for what they're still doing, or what it looks like if there is a positive case, and what they do. to see whether or not it's something that you feel comfortable with. It's one of those things that school leaders and childcare leaders have had to make really, really hard decisions around this with very little guidance, quite honestly, about what is considered best practice in early childhood. A lot of the guidance that has been out there has been for the K through 12 system, and the last to get guidance has been the early child care arena. And so because of that, a lot of early child care providers have had to make these decisions on their own, maybe in conjunction with the community. They might have made a survey and talked to their families about what they feel comfortable with, what their staff. So it's important to ask those questions as you interview these leaders about what those steps are. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be COVID, it can be all illnesses, right? I just want to make the caveat here that when your child first goes to school, whether they are an infant or a 3-year-old, the likelihood of them getting sick often is very, very high. And because of that, you are going to see where children are going to get sniffles, they're going to possibly get hand, foot, and mouth, they're possibly going to get an array of different illnesses out there. And to be aware of that, because that means that you will have to be home when your child has symptoms, and you're going to have to stay with them, and that care is going to go away during those times. But it's very common for children to be sick within the first, at least the first year of their experience going to school. And that, unfortunately, that's just a norm of that. Even all of the health and safety procedures out there and washing hands, it does help. But when you have 2-year-olds that put everything in their mouth, the likelihood of them getting something before we even know that something has been in the classroom is very high. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So preparing your child and yourself for that big day. One thing that you can do to prepare for the day is to read books about back to school. Some of my favorite are The Kissing Hand, which is a very cute story about a mom raccoon and her baby raccoon. And she sends the baby raccoon off with a kiss in their hand. And so that kiss stays with them throughout the day until they come back. And so some families even maybe will send them with a sticker or something like that to help remind them of their family all day. And then there's also The Night Before Preschool, which is just a fun story about the things that you'll be experiencing before preschool. The next is to be honest with them. And so sometimes we are tempted when we drop them off to be like, you don't really want to address it, and you just kind of give them to the caregiver and walk away. And while I don't think that, having a really long drop off is a great idea, I do think that telling them mommy's going to work or daddy's going to work, and you're going to school, and I will see you later, and I love you, even if they're upset and crying, is really important to be that stable presence for them, and to be honest with them and not tell them, that you'll just be right back in the next 5 minutes or anything like that. That you want to tell them what's really happening. And then also there's lots of rituals for drop off. Sometimes it's certain hugs or kisses. Sometimes it's certain patterns as you're walking in the door. Be consistent with them, because that helps them in getting used to dropping off at school every day. There's a program called Conscious Discipline, which is a wonderful support for teachers and for parents. And they talk about an I love you ritual, which is just a ritual for how you drop your child off every day. And I really appreciate that. Next slide, please. So preparing your child and yourself. This is a new world experience. So just like if we are moving into a new job or just moved to a new state or a new home and things feel uncomfortable, children are going to have the same feelings. And so they don't know the caregiver yet. They haven't built that trust yet. And until they do, we might see separation anxiety. We might see crying. We might see big emotions. And so those are some things to expect. Again, you giving them that security by saying, I'll be back. I love you. Mommy's going to go to work and you're going to go to school, and giving them that assurance really helps. But knowing that this is a normal part of the process is important as well. I usually would tell parents that it takes anywhere between 2 and 8 weeks for a child to kind of adjust to this new environment and to make new friends. Some children walk in and don't ever cry, and that does happen too. We have some pretty social butterflies, and that happens. And then other children walk in and they're pretty excited for the first day or two, and we've got this honeymoon period, and then we start seeing the crying and drop off every day. Those are all normal experiences. But again, once they start building trust with their caregiver, once they start making friends and getting to know the routine, that's when we start seeing that separation anxiety go down. If that separation anxiety is lasting beyond that 8 weeks, then it might be something you want to talk with your caregiver about, see if there's some other things that you can do to help support your child in this transition. And then also I had mentioned it already, but the illness and the quarantines, there still are a lot of quarantines happening. If a child is exposed, sometimes that you can mean you can be out for another 5 days. So those are all things to consider as you're kind of mentally preparing to drop your child off each day. Okay, a couple more resources here. So here at First Things First, we actually fund a lot of different programs, and you can find this in our Find FTF programs on our website. It's on First Things First website. And some of the programs that we support in the Tucson region are home visitation. So some programs where they come to you and support you in your home. So maybe you're not quite ready for that childcare situation, but you'd love to have someone to help support you in your journey. That is one way to do that. Another is the Birth to 5 helpline. So this is a phone number that you can call, and you can get support for things like behavior or basic medical things that might be going on. And they'll point you in the right direction to some services out there, or even sometimes give you some tips on how to address something. Maybe it's a feeding thing, or maybe it's a behavior that you're wanting to address. They are a great support as well. There are lots of other supports out there, but I'll direct you to the First Things First programs website, and you can definitely check those out. So for the home visitation programs, it is a qualifying program. So there's a question around, are the home visitation programs available for all, or do you need to be low income to qualify? Most of them you do need to be low income to qualify, but please go ahead and research it, because it can't hurt to look it up and make sure that you would qualify or not. And next slide, please. Okay, so that is the content that I had prepared for today. I don't know if there's anyone on Facebook or in our chat that would have any questions, but please know, again, my name is Amy Morales Baum, and I'm the Regional Director for Pima North. I am happy to answer any questions, to discuss things further with you. I don't specifically, I'm in this presentation, I'm not going to specifically say, oh, this is a great school or this one's not, but I am a lot of the directors that I used to work side by side with, friends with a lot of them, and I know of a lot of the schools in our area, and would be happy to direct you to schools in your area if you want to talk about it more further. I'm happy to do that with you. I hope that these resources were helpful to you. I do have a link for all of the different websites that I mentioned throughout my program. And so I'm putting those in the chat here now, and hopefully the recorded version can also find a way to have links to all of those as well.
We do have a couple questions. The first one is from a person on Facebook Live, and she asks, is this information available to those who speak Spanish?
That's a great question. This particular presentation is not in Spanish right now, but I would love to find a way to make that happen. A childcare resource and referral, I do believe, has everything in Spanish as well. So you can navigate that website, and it's also in Spanish.
Awesome. And then we can always work together with our Spanish speaking village and have you come and maybe present for them as well. That would be awesome.
That would be great.
And then our next question is, how can I find an in-home child care or daycare? And we talked about that in the beginning, but if you want to touch on it one more time, that'd be great.
Yeah, so again, childcare resource and referral, they are the largest resource for finding childcare in our state and in any state, really. So if you move, even you can use childcare resource and referral and the local chapter in that state to determine where care is in your area. So you can put in home daycare in there in terms of your priorities. When you first put in your zip code, you can skip this survey, but it's actually very helpful. The first slide is a survey about your zip code and what your priorities are, whether it's you're wanting a center or accredited or a home care. And so you can put those priorities in and it will kind of siphon through all of those and determine which ones are the home cares and regions in your area.
Another question in the chat is, what are the ratios specifically for babies?
Yeah, so if you go to the, there's state ratios for all age groups. And I just want to double check it before I give it to you. So for babies, it's one, there are differences in between what is a state ratio and what is considered an accreditation or a quality child care ratio. So in our state ratios are actually much, much higher, meaning you're going to have more children to, hold on, my love. This is mom life, right? So in a childcare setting, so for state ratios for infants, for example, it's 1 to 5. So for so you would have 1 adult to 5 babies. Now, many childcare centers would consider that pretty high, and so because of that, many childcare centers are going to be at like 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 if they're in that higher quality bracket. As you get older, as the kids get older, the ratios get higher. So for example, for 2-year-olds, it's 1 to 8. So 1 caregiver to 8 children. Now, I don't know if you've ever cared for 8 2-year-olds before, but 8 2-year-olds in one room is a lot of 2-year-olds with 1 caregiver. So some schools, if they have the ability, or if again, they are accredited or a quality program, they are going to have maybe closer to 1 to 5, and you'll have like 10 2-year-olds in a classroom with 2 teachers, or 12 2-year-olds in a classroom with 2 teachers. Yes, exactly. And then as you go up, it gets higher. For 3-year-olds, it's 1 to 13. And for 4-year-olds, it's 1 to 14, or sorry, 1 to 15. If there are more than 20 children in a classroom, it is against ratio. You cannot have more than 20 kids in any given classroom, no matter how many caregivers there are in that classroom. So that is a licensing rule that is across the state there. But so that caregiver ratio is something to really look at and ask during that childcare, as you're looking at that checklist from CCR&R. And it's a question on there, what is the ratio at this or the family care home? Because sometimes family care homes will try and pack in as many children as they can too, because that's how they make their living. But you want to make sure your child is going to be attended to and get the best care possible. Are there regulations for public schools? That's a great question. So for ratios, so this is something that's really interesting to me. So in the state for 5-year-olds, the recommendation for, or really the regulation for 5-year-olds for in the preschool sector is 1 to 20 for 5-year-olds. However, in the kindergarten setting, often you'll see more than that. My sister-in-law teaches at a local school and there's 32 children in the classroom. They have 2 people, but that is a lot of 5-year-olds in a classroom. So I think that it's something that K through 12 is not held to the same standards as licensing, and they do not have to follow those rules. So once you're looking into the elementary school world, you're going to see a different set of ratios. But what is considered best practice and what are state regulations for the preschool population, for that under 5 population, is that no more than 1 to 20. And I will say, when you have a fabulous educator who really knows what they're doing, sometimes 1 to 20 is possible. Now, it's always great if you can have those extra hands. 5-year-olds still need help wiping their nose and going to the bathroom. And so having those extra hands can be so, so helpful. And I highly recommend, and I love lower ratios. But unfortunately, because of the way that the early childhood system is, it's not always possible for centers and for family care homes to provide those types of ratios and be able to make it financially. It's very difficult. And so sometimes those higher ratios are there just because they have to be able to make their finances every single month. So again, paying attention to the quality of the childcare provider, their experience, the teachers, whether or not there's a lot of turnover, those are things to pay attention to over how many children are in the classroom. While it does matter, I think that the experience of the person is more important. All right, next question is, how do I start an uncomfortable conversation with a provider? Oh, uncomfortable conversations. So as a director, that is pretty much your job all day long, uncomfortable conversations, whether it be with parents or with teachers, that is a part of your job. So know that directors are used to it. Administrators are used to it. Teachers are even used to it, especially if they've been in the field for a while. I always love to use the framework from Brene Brown. She has a courageous conversation template. And it really allows you to kind of check yourself emotionally, to say that I'm not just throwing this all on you, this issue, that I'm going to be able to sit next to you at the table and not necessarily across from you or turn from you, that I'm going to try and be as objective as possible in this situation, although it can be really hard when your baby's involved, right? I think that the sooner you try and address it, though, the better. Instead of letting something fester for days and days or weeks and weeks about a frustration of something that happened in the class, bring it up to your child's teacher, bring it up to the provider that something happened and it didn't sit well with you and you'd like to see it addressed. If you have that quality care provider that you trust and that you have a relationship with, then having that conversation is going to be a lot easier. And so it's Brene Brown also uses this idea of marbles in the jar, that we have to like give little bits of trust over time, and that's what creates trust. And so you need that with your childcare provider. And so if you have that foundation of trust, if they've built that with you, then having these harder conversations will be easier. So addressing them as soon as you can, and knowing that a teacher cannot always have a conversation at the door, that they need a set aside time to do this. So you can say to them or message them through the parenting app that might be used, I would like to have a conversation with you. When is a time in the next coming days that we could have this conversation, so that they can set aside some concerted time to actually discuss whatever the issue is. If it's a more emergent issue, then of course you can bring that to their attention. And that's when maybe getting the director involved, something like that, because the director might have a little more time to set aside and have that conversation right away, versus a teacher who needs to pay attention to all the children that have come that day. It's okay to have hard conversations. It's okay to advocate for your child if there's something going on that you may not agree with. Any other questions?
I think that's all we have for now. We appreciate you so much being here, Amy, and for sharing all this information. I'm going to turn some time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second and let Eileen, she joined us today. She's our village lead, and let her give some information on our August gathering. But thank you again, Amy, for all of this information. It's so wonderful I feel prepared for what's next, especially in the coming months, for those of us who are looking into schooling for our children or our toddlers or whatever it is. I feel way more prepared. So I appreciate it so much.
I'm so glad. And actually, I forgot a quick thing is that realistically, I know we don't always have these timeframes, but you can start looking for childcare for the coming school year in either the late fall, so that November, December timeframe, or January, February, because a lot of schools open up their registration that semester before for the coming school year. And there are a lot of the child care centers that are quality right now, because staffing is so hard. They are filling up spots at least 6 months in advance for the coming school year. So make
Wow.
sure to get out there, to start touring, to start looking as soon as you can. Again, you don't always have the luxury and you do have to sometimes just find care. But if you have the ability to do that, start touring that January, February timeframe, because that's when enrollment opens for a lot of these schools and home care providers. So make sure that you can get your child on a list of one of those quality providers when they still have availability.
Thank you. Megan, will you pin Eileen so she can be seen, and I'll let her share her information on the next upcoming gathering in August.
Hi, I'm so glad that I was able to sneak in at the end. I apologize. But my name's Eileen, and I want to thank Amy and Camille for this amazing presentation. There's so many questions that we don't know to ask when we go look at a preschool, a nursery, a kindergarten, an elementary school. I thought I'd figured it out with preschool, and then I got to elementary school and went, oh, wow, this is even more exciting and scary. So all the tips that Amy shared, please take with you through all the schools that your children may go to. So I wanted to share that for our next village, which is the 4th Wednesday in August, we have an occupational therapist named Melissa, and she is going to be talking about purposeful play with babies, 0 to 2, she's going to focus on. And a lot of families don't even think about, well, I can't play, she's just a baby. And we talk to our baby and we coo with our baby and we ask the baby to look at us, but we can do a lot of other things besides just tummy time when they're tiny. And so she's going to be presenting her knowledge and sharing it with us. And I want everybody to think about some questions about playing with little people. And that'll be in August. And then also, I know just for a plug for state information, First Things First Summit is coming up for anybody who's interested in learning more. And 4th trimester ecosystem is coming up in September. So there's a lot of other opportunities to participate in villages, conferences, summits, to learn more about early childhood. And I invite you all to search around on the internet and see what you can find, and find something that you're interested in. And if anybody's ever interested in presenting for any of our villages, you can reach out to Camille, to Jenny, to myself. You can go to the website and get information. You can go to the Facebook page. We're always looking for more topics that are interesting to families and that we can share with them. So I just want to thank you all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, Facebook.